To graph tangent and cotangent, it is extremely similar to everything we've done so far. We're going to graph the same 4 things, do them in the same 5 steps, mostly the same. There are a couple key differences though. So let's start by doing this first one together. First we have our amplitude, which is still in front, so is 1. Vertical shift is still behind, so it's none. Now, here's our first main difference. Remember, the period of tangent and cotangent is different than the rest. So up to this point, every time we've done period, we've always done 2 pi over our number. That changes for tangent and cotangent because their basic period is only pi long. So instead of doing 2 pi over 1/2, we're going to do pi over 1/2. Do keep switch flip to give me 2 pi, and doesn't look like I have any phase shift this time. So let's start like we normally do. Vertical shift is none, so we have right there on the x-axis. Amplitude is 1, so up 1, down 1. Phase shift is none. Now, here's our next key difference. This is a tangent shape. Now remember, tangent is the only one that is centered on the y-axis, aka it should be centered on your phase shift line. So instead of starting at my phase shift line and going 2 pi over, because that's my period, I want to take this period of 2 pi and center it around this yellow line. And remember, you only have to do this for tangent. If it's cotangent, you can still just start at the yellow line and go 2 pi over. Tangent is the only graph that needs to be centered. So if I want to center 2 pi around this line, I'm going to go pi this way and pi that way. And that will give me 2 pi from side to side. And this is the box I need to fit my tangent graph in. Notice it is centered on the yellow line. So now let's do our tangent points. Tangent is increasing from left to right. So I take these boxes and I cut them into fourths, kind of like we did with sine and cosine. Then our first point is on the amplitude line. Next is on the center. And next is on our amplitude line. And from there, we can connect our dots. And there's our tangent graph. And remember, we always need at least 2 waves. So let's do another wave out to here. And repeat the shape. And there's our tangent. So it's very similar to everything you've been doing. The only thing you have to be careful of is put pi on top for your period. And for tangent, make sure you center it on the yellow line. So with that in mind, let's try a cotangent one. For this cotangent, amplitude this time is 2. No vertical shift. The period, or I should say the frequency in here is 1, and we always do pi over because it's tangent and cotangent. So pi over 1 gives me a period of pi. And our phase shift should be left, or sorry, that's not left, left pi thirds. So let's draw this. Vertical shift first, that's none, so that stays here. Amplitude up 2. Down 2. Phase shift is left pi thirds. So I'm going to go make this one pi thirds, negative pi thirds. So I can go left pi thirds. And this is a cotangent graph. Cotangent is decreasing from left to right. And cotangent, we don't need to worry about centering on this line. Only tangent does that. So from this line, I'm going to go over my period amount. So I'm going to go over pi. That gets me to there. And these are the lines that I need to fit my cotangent shape between. So I'm going, notice from my yellow line to my green line, I have 1, 2, 3 boxes. I'm going to cut that into fourths. So 3 boxes divided by 4 is 3/4. So I'm going to go in 3/4 of a box, and that's my first cotangent point. In 3/4 of a box, that's my next cotangent point. And then in 3/4 of a box, that's my last cotangent point. And I connect them. Notice that I specifically made them so that it's decreasing because we know that's how cotangent is. And now I just need to repeat the shape. So let's go pi more over. And repeat those points to get another cotangent decreasing from left to right shape. Now, oh, I totally forgot to do my asymptotes. So let's do our asymptotes for this one. Looks like the first asymptote I've got is at negative pi thirds. And it looks like each of these asymptotes is pi apart. Let's do that really quickly up here on my tangent one. Here's my asymptotes on tangents, since I forgot that. Sorry, guys. My first asymptote is at negative pi. And these asymptotes seem to be 2 pi apart. I add 2 pi to get to the next, add 2 pi to get to the next. So that is a really good example of tangent and cotangent. Remember, tangent is centered on your phase shift line, cotangent isn't. Tangent is increasing from left to right, cotangent is decreasing from left to right. So now that you've gotten all that, let's see if you're ready to try one on your own. Let's take this one, and notice I already took that 2 out for you to make it a little easier. Remember, you always need to separate your period from the x. And I want you to pause the video, try to graph this one on your own. Notice this is a tangent, which means it's going to be increasing, and it needs to be centered on the phase shift line. So pause the video, try this one out on your own, and then come back to check and see how you did. Let's check your work. I went up 1 for my vertical shift, up 3, down 3 for my amplitude. I went left pi fourths for my phase shift. And because this is a tangent, it should be centered on that phase shift line. So I know my period is pi halves. I need to center that pi halves on the yellow line. So here's my yellow line. I centered pi halves on that, by going pi fourths on either side. And then I just needed to draw my increasing tangent shape. So a fourth over, a fourth over, a fourth over, and that gives me my increasing tangent shape. And then of course I repeated it over there. So it looks like my first asymptote is at negative pi halves, and then I add pi halves to get to each of the next ones. You could honestly, if you don't want to start at negative pi halves, you just have to pick one of these asymptotes. So notice one of our asymptotes is at 0. So I could have changed this to be 0 plus pi halves k2. You just have to pick one of these and then add the width apart. So that's a tangent. Hopefully you did pretty good, maybe a couple small mistakes. So let's try one more and do a cotangent. So remember, cotangent is not centered and it's decreasing. There's your cotangent shape. So pause the video on this one, try to find all of these on your own, and then come back to check your work. Let's check your work. I went down 1 for my vertical shift, up 2, down 2 for my amplitude. I went right pi 6 for my phase shift. And because this is cotangent, I don't need to center it on that. I just need to go pi thirds over for the period. And there's my first line. And then I just have to put the cotangent shape in there. So a fourth, a fourth, a fourth of the boxes. And decreasing gives me my cotangent shape. And then I repeat the wave. So it looks like our asymptotes start here at pi 6. And they are all each, I should say, pi thirds apart. There's our asymptotes. And that is graphing tangent and cotangent. Now, one last thing before we end this video. I want you to notice that we said for secant and cosecant, the number in front of k is always half the period. For tangent and cotangent, the number in front of k is always exactly the period. Period is 2 pi, that's what's in front of k. Period is pi, that's what's in front of k. So that's different than secant and cosecant. That was half the period. Tangent and cotangent, it's exactly the period. But that gives you some experience graphing tangent and cotangent. Thankfully, we are pretty much done graphing until chapter 6. That is the next time we do graphing. And this is really the most graphing we do in 1060. This is as hard as it gets. So if you're really sick of graphing, take a deep breath. We'll get to 2.3 next, and it is very different, and we'll be back to shorter lessons. You are now ready to get started on your homework.